y'all called this a while ago. You said, how do they usually do this thing? Who flipped the most from losses to wins in a season is usually what's going to take some type of precedence. And for the Lions, they were good last year, and this year they were great. But it feels like they just left all context on the production floor. Like, this defense got decimated. They lost their best defensive player, probably the best defensive player in the NFL, or at least was going to be trending that way this season. I just don't understand exactly how they come to this decision, Flannel.
Yeah, this Dan Campbell was 100% snubbed. And I want to make something very clear. Kevin O'Connell did do a great job. The fact that he was able to, as an offensive coach, get Sam Darnold playing at the level that he was in the regular season after Sam Darnold had been a draft bust, that is to be commended. And I will say this. If the Vikings had won that Week 18 game and been the NFC North Divisional champions, I would have happily been like, you know what, Kevin O'Connell, you did your job. You were 15-2. You won the NFC North. Congratulations. But we all know that's not what happened. We know that in Week 18, Dan Campbell led his Lions without Ali McNeil, without Carlton Davis, and without Aiden Hutchinson, and they got the win 31-9 over the Vikings. Dan Campbell, you're right, it's 100% about context. It's the fact that all of those guys missed significant time. It's the amount of players that they had on IR. And think about this. Wasn't it funny and kind of symbolic that the game right after Aiden Hutchinson goes down, and even some of us fans wonder, how are they going to respond? They go into Minnesota and beat Kevin O'Connell's team in Week 18 with everything on the line, as I already said. With Week 18, everything on the line. No Aleem, no Carlton Davis, no Aiden Hutchinson. Minnesota is pretty much completely healthy. Beat them by 22. Dan Campbell 100% deserved coach of the year. Kevin O'Connell, you get second. Many other years you would have won it. Not this one. Dan Campbell was absolutely snubbed.
And in those two games, he got outcoached.
100%.
That's the thing that I'm just like, the people who continue to pick against, some of the people who continue to pick against the Lions, some of those people who continue to doubt the Lions, because they believe that, you know what, they've just lost too much on defense. Now all of a sudden, what? They just have revisionist history, and now they're voting for Kevin O'Connell? As if they don't remember when they said, no, the Lions don't have enough to win. Well, then how did they win? Who was preaching next man up mentality? Whose offense was this? This wasn't Ben Johnson's offense who got an award. He does. He deserves the award. But you ask people, they'll tell you that this was Dan Campbell's offense from the start. And that's what I'm saying. You look at the greatness that was on this team and how he even positioned those position coaches, bringing in a Terrell Williams, and understanding look at all of the different position coaches, man. All of these guys that he was able to kind of, from a development standpoint, coach up. And this where it just doesn't sit right with me, because the Lions, as we know, all Detroit sports, are always going to be in a position where they have to go the extra mile. I just thought this year they did. That's what makes this one even worse than the narrative surrounding like Saquon Barkley not winning MVP. This is one where record-wise he was better. Head-to-head he was better. Hey, look at the strategies, especially down the stretches of those games. He was better. Go back to last year, he was better. Like, that's what I'm saying. I don't. What do people need? This is. I've been a couple years running now where Dan Campbell has continued to take out the belt and straight up BTA to the Vikings, and specifically Kevin O'Connell. I don't understand this concept of just, hey, you know what? Cute season, guys, but Kevin O'Connell, hey, participation award.
I just wonder if some of those who voted on the award really truly understood the magnitude of what the Lions were missing. We obviously did, because we cover the team every single day. But to me, if you don't, if you just see it as, okay, they go from 12 wins to 15, they win the NFC North 2 years in a row, and the award traditionally goes to the biggest turnaround, which in and of itself is kind of a sham. If that's what they want to see, then you're just not doing your homework. You're not doing your due diligence. You shouldn't even have a vote for this, because that 15-2, as we've talked about, has a lot of context surrounding it. There are a lot of teams throughout the history of the NFL, including the San Francisco 49ers this year, who themselves have a great coach that weren't able to overcome a plethora of injuries. What the Lions did was a minor miracle, but because of Dan Campbell, partially because of Dan Campbell, but because Dan Campbell at the top as the leader and because of what the Lions have organizationally, they made what they did almost seem normal. And that is the biggest compliment that I can give to a Dan Campbell, is that he's such a great leader that he wouldn't let this team quit or say die. It was unbelievable, and he should have been rewarded for it. And I personally am worried now that he will never get one.
I mean, because I think it's like this, nobody wanted to see the Lions get bounced, but Steve Wild says he doesn't really care about the award. He just didn't want to see the Lions get bounced the way that they did.
Yeah.
And I get that. To people who feel that way, especially right now, I understand that. But we talked about the ways that we know we're going to feel, the conversations we know we're going to have, because at the end of the day, we're fans. And what do we talk about our teams? Their history. And I know that for the last 60 years, we haven't had too much good to talk about at all. I know for a lot of Thanksgivings it was trash. We go in there and there's no banners. There's nothing in the trophy case. There's nothing to write home about in the history books except for how bad we've been. So for me personally, I do take a little bit from these things. Do I want the players to continue to say, you know what, we didn't get the job done? Sure. But for everything that fans have invested, we do deserve more. But I'm also not going to scoff at the potential of having everything that we should have. Similar to like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who wanted everything. That's just how I personally feel, man. I wanted them to be able to go out there and win a Super Bowl. But if our guys aren't getting the recognition they deserve, I care about that too.
Well, and that's where you almost just one quick thing. And that's where you have to separate yourself from your disappointment of what happened in the playoffs. Yeah, if you ask Dan Campbell, he probably doesn't care. Or if you asked him and if you put a gun to his head, he'd probably say that it should be Nick Sirianni or Andy Reid because they're in the big game and the Lions are not. But that's why we have a job to do and really just look at just the regular season. KG?
Yeah, and like he said it right there, it's a regular season award, and we just want our people to get what they deserve. And, the Jared Goff conversation, I'm not mad that he was fifth in MVP voting. But when it comes to Coach of the Year and you pick a guy in Kevin O'Connell, which, Sam, I've been critical of Kevin O'Connell, during my time here. But since then, I have changed my tune. I feel like he is a really, really good coach, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. But with that being said, it just comes down to a few things for me. One, the Lions won more games. I don't care if it was just one more game. We won more games than Kevin O'Connell. We beat them twice in the regular season. And you want to talk about a game in which, the very next week after you lost Aiden Hutchinson, who at that point and honestly a couple weeks after that was the best defensive player in football, you go into Minnesota and you ended up winning that game when they had you down 10 in the first quarter. And outside of a David Montgomery untimely, uncharacteristic fumble, the Lions thoroughly controlled that game. And then with everything on the line in week 18, Minnesota comes in here and you hold them to 9 points with one of the most explosive offenses to that point. I don't know, what the decision behind this was. If you were ever going to give the award to Dan Campbell, this would have been the year to do it. So I don't understand it. It is what it is. I'm not trying to say Kevin O'Connell isn't deserving, but he's not more deserving than Dan Campbell, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, not at all. And Robert Sloppy Toppenheimer, one of our favorite chat names, he says, can't have too many chips on the shoulder. And I know that these things, they help to spur. Only so much is what you do to prepare. It's what you do if you're healthy. And it's what you do to execute that ultimately makes a difference. And those are things that we're learning. How to measure how much these chips on the shoulder actually matter and mean to what's going to happen out there on the field. But DJ Justice says people still don't respect the way Dan Campbell coaches. Win it all next year is the only way to silence the haters. And that's a little bit of what I wanted to ask as well as we say what up though to some friends first is just this aspect of, do you think that there's a narrative that works against some of these players who we think might have gotten snubbed?
I mean, well, when it comes to Dan Campbell, you saw it on ESPN with a very respected guy in the history of the NFL, Teddy Bruschi. After all that had happened, Teddy Bruschi still basically said that Dan Campbell needed to, for lack of a better term, grow up and coach like a big boy on a big boy team. Like, stuff like that is still out there. I'm not necessarily saying that it's necessarily the biggest reason why Dan Campbell didn't win. I think the biggest reason why Dan Campbell didn't win is the whole Sam Darnold factor. Like, how the hell you win 14 games with Sam Darnold? And that's true. And like I said, credit where credit is due to Kevin O'Connell, but it still should have been Dan Campbell because of what he had to go through and the fact that the Lions were 15-2 and the Vikings were 14-3. Like I said, if the Vikings win that game, give it to Kevin O'Connell. But we can't live in make believe. We live in the here and now in reality. And the Lions won that game.
And I don't know how people don't respect Dan Campbell's coaching when they've literally copied it across the league. Like it makes no sense to me. Dan Campbell wins with the formula that he uses. You can say what you want about the crazy zany fourth down decisions. Look at the numbers. Look at the percentages. He is leading in all of them. Since he goes for it on fourth down and he's the crazy man, he has been successful. I don't like that argument. I don't. And I know whoever in the chat said that wasn't trying to, argue that, but still, like, I just don't like that.
And shout out to Rod Beard, because to be fair, he's like, you know what? We're clued into our team. National media is just clued into the teams that this is the weird part.
I'm not buying that either.
At the top. And the Lions are supposed to be at the top, but people are included. Because my thing is this. All this weird discourse that I heard against Dan Campbell being this gambler, why didn't I hear any of that against the Washington Commanders all season? That's what I'm saying. Like, when I talk about like the narratives and the trends, he's right. You got people sitting up on their platforms, whether it be politicians or former players, spewing like trash against our coach. And now I'm just starting to realize maybe this is the lingering scent that's just out there, because what else are they consuming?
And to add to that, they gave Dan Quinn credit for going for it so much on fourth down. So I'm not buying that national media argument either at this point, because the Lions are a national media team. We keep saying the Lions are America's team. ESPN and all them other places, they notice the Lions. They've talked about the Lions more in this year than they've ever in the history of the Lions talked about them. So no, I'm not buying that, man. They watch the games just like we do. They have access to the games just like we do. We had one of the biggest primetime schedules of any team in the league. They know. They decided to go to